Okay. Well, hello everyone. I am Isaac Celia, founder and artistic director at Queen City Opera, and I'm joined here by Jim Sloofman, founder and president emeritus of the Wagner Society of Cincinnati, and Deb Lewis, who is the current president of both the Wagner Society of Cincinnati and Queen City Opera. And we're joined by a very, very special guest today, Ric Furman, a real live Heldentenor, a rare superhuman voice. And we're going to have a little discussion about what is a Heldentenor and how does one become one, if that's something that even is possible. So, just as a little bit of context, Richard Wagner was a visionary composer who stretched the boundaries of what music could do in many, many regards. He invented lots of instruments in the orchestra that expanded what music could do, mostly brass instruments and wind instruments, but he also expanded what the human voice was capable or expected to do. And we're going to be talking a little bit today about how that came about. So, Rick, can you tell us a little bit about your musical background? How did you start singing? How did you first start studying?
Sure. Well, I started the same way probably most people started singing. I thought that singing was kind of fun. I had a friend who joined choir, and I thought I'm going to go hang out with Joe. So I joined choir to sing with Joe, and did that for a little while in junior high, and then went to high school, tried that, ended up getting a scholarship to a university, and before I knew it, my path just sort of led automatically toward singing. It was never really a life plan. I know some people think when I grow up, I want to be a singer. That was never me. Um, I was actually intent on being a chemical engineer, and in fact, I went to undergrad for chemical engineering. But then it turned and if I sang while I did my undergrad, then they'd pay for me to go to school. So I did that, and turned out I had more fun singing than I did with chemical engineering. Go figure. So we so I left the chemical engineering behind and went back to school. Went to CCM in Cincinnati, and that basically took me through all of my education. After that, I just tried to make a living, trying to find any path I could. As as you all know, and probably most of the people who would see this, it's a very competitive field.
Totally, totally. So, when you first started the path as a singer, did you already know that you were going to be doing Wagner in this very specialized vocal category, or did you start? I know some Heldentenors start out as baritones. Like when you first started singing, what kind of voice did you think you had, or what were your teachers telling you?
Uh, I was also a baritone. I started as a baritone, and in fact, all the way through CCM, I was a baritone. It wasn't until after grad school that I made the switch. I was most comfortable singing in baritone land. I was most comfortable singing Mozart and moving into some of the bigger things. Probably not too much into Puccini unless we did something like Chouinard or something. But I was definitely more of a light lyric type baritone. Um, I thought that someday I would sing probably bigger stuff, like maybe someday get into Verdi, but I never really thought that I would move to tenor until I got to grad school. And that's when I started thinking, I think I really will move up at some point. When I moved to tenor, I started off pretty light lyric. And I was told, sing Mozart, never go heavier than Mozart. That's just not your voice. Um, I don't think I ever had a voice teacher tell me that, but a lot of experts
Hmm.
would listen to me do an audition or do a role and say, oh, no, don't push yourself by singing something as heavy as the Duke of Mantua or something like that. You'll kill your voice. Sing just Mozart at the heaviest. And I tried that for a number of years, did okay, was able to make a living for part of it. And then one year I did a bunch of auditions in Europe and a bunch of auditions in the United States. After the audition season, I had a gig that ended in March. And when March rolled around and finished, I had no gigs, no contracts, and no future. So I thought, I've always thought I would sing something heavier. So I think I'm going to try that. What's the worst that could happen? I won't get hired. I'm doing that right now. So I went upstairs. I picked up, of all things, a Siegfried score. showing how
Well,
clueless I was. You
Yeah.
know, put on a recording and sang through it, and actually got through it and thought, oh, that's interesting. I learned a couple arias. One was the aria from Fidelio, and the other one was Lohengrin, I believe, the Garlatzählung. And when I learned those two, took them to my teacher at the time, and I said, I decided to try something. Tell me what you think. Put it in front of him, and he listened to it and said, okay. But I never believed that I would sing Wagner. Not when I was in when I was in undergrad. When I was in grad school, Wagnerians were like 15 feet tall. Probably they all were built like linebackers, men and women alike. That just that just wasn't quite me. I mean, I'm 6'3", and I don't know what my weight is anymore. Somewhere a little over 200 pounds, I'm sure. Uh, so I'm pretty sizable, but Wagnerians were way bigger than me, and there was no mistaking a Wagnerian voice. It was superhuman, right? And I never expected that was what I would end up doing. It was just
Let's get under the hood just for a second and just talk about voices in general for any listeners who might not be familiar with all of the technical terms we've been throwing around. So voices are usually classified in terms of, the simplest way to do it is just in terms of height, how high someone sings. So female voices are usually classified as like soprano, which is the highest, or mezzo, which is kind of a middle voice, or alto, which is a lower voice. And then male voices are usually either tenor up top, baritone in the middle, or bass at the bottom. And the other axis of that is kind of the color of the voice. And there are a lot of intangibles there about like, how dark or bright a voice sounds, or how loud a voice is, or how agile it is. And especially in Germany, there's a very, very nuanced system that's used to classify voices because, in Germany, they do way more operatic performances per capita per day than in the US could dream of. So there's so many more singers working in theaters, expected to do so much more repertoire. It makes sense for them to have a very nuanced system for quickly identifying roles that would be a good fit for a singer. So you were talking about how you were singing Mozart for the earlier part of your studies, and that's usually considered lighter repertoire, and you were singing as a baritone, which is a lower voice. But some of the other roles that you mentioned like Florestan in Fidelio. So as we start talking more about like what a Heldentenor is it only Wagner, or is there other repertoire that also falls into this Heldentenor category? And what do you think differentiates that kind of repertoire?
The term Heldentenor is specifically a thing that belongs to Wagner. Now it spills outside of. At this point, a Heldentenor doesn't only sing Wagner, but we didn't have that term until Wagner decided, I need a heroic tenor. I'm going to call him heroic tenor. Yeah. So he termed that, he coined that term. Incidentally, he also coined the term Helden baritone or bass baritone. Before Wagner, there was no bass baritone. There's either bass or baritone. So as you mentioned, he pushed the limits and expanded what many instruments and the human voice is capable of. And he did so with not reckless abandon, but it was risky for a lot of people, and it was dangerous for a lot of people in terms of just vocal health and being able to sustain it. The Helden tenor voice tends to be bigger, louder, darker sounding than what the voice act than the notes that you may be singing. You may be singing a fairly high note, but it may not sound as high because your voice just sounds more baritonal. Yeah. And what was the second half of your question? There was a second half that I'm blanking on.
We were asking about other repertoire. So the thing I would ask is, as imagine that we're back in Wagner's time, and he's writing, Tannhäuser, Lohengrin, thinking about the Ring. And the music that he's listening to and that he's conducting includes things like Weber, like Freischütz, and Fidelio, Florestan, and Heinrich Marschner. Like these are the things that he's listening to in his world. are there precedents or were there trends among what other composers were doing or among the singers that he was working with that you think may have pushed them to this? Or do you think it was completely something that he invented, out of thin air?
No, I think it was I struggle to see a logical progression, but I think it was certainly in the direction. It wasn't until the early 1800s that the male voice would sing in full chest voice above the staff. They would go into a falsetto. Uh, the story goes, though I don't know that it's true necessarily, that Rossini quit writing opera the day he heard a tenor sing a B flat full chest voice. I don't know that that's true, but that's the way the story goes. And so the fact that Wagner comes along right during that time and he's being influenced by, among others, Rossini, who he did not have a good relationship with. He and Rossini were famous rivals, not rivals. They just did not like each other, I should say. So he was listening to what people were doing and the composers that you were talking about, and it was the logical progression to say, okay, we're going bigger and louder and higher and fuller with bigger orchestras. Let's see what I can do. And he did.
Yeah.
So,
Can I add something here?
yeah, Jim, go for it, please, please.
If you consider the circumstances of the event of Schnorr von Karelsfeld singing the first Tristan and then passing away like 2 or 3 weeks later, which many people considered the possibility that the role actually pushed him to the point of ill health. That supports exactly what you're talking about, Rick.
He was 28 years old at the time and very, very large. So yeah. I don't want to say that he wasn't. He may have had a pre-existing condition.
Yeah, probably.
But I'm sure that singing Tristan did not help. That is a beast of a role.
Also, Rick, you talk about the Heldentenor having that possible heavy or darker aspect to the voice. And when I think about some of the recent performances that I've seen where that the Met has produced with Kaufmann, that voice is very different than what a lot of people consider to be that really bright Heldentenor voice. And I think it has a tremendous impact. It's very unique.
Yes. Kaufmann is somewhat of an outlier today, in that there's a trend in Wagner for the voices to be brighter and shinier. I read some writings of somebody who put the Heldentenor voice on an axis of sunshine to gravel, and the interesting thing about Kaufmann is I wouldn't put him as very far on either end.
Yeah,
shine doesn't really apply to his voice, and neither does gravel, as you will hear some Heldentenors do. He just happens to have a very dark voice with enough size and ring to it that he sings Wagner, that he can sing Wagner. This is not my judgment, I don't feel. This is something that he has indicated as well. He doesn't view himself as a Heldentenor necessarily. He is just a tenor who sings some Helden rep. He's very happy to sing more lyric rep, seemingly. Moving into the Werthers and some of the French and Italian rep, he loves to do that, and he does it very, very well.
Yeah.
Deb or Jim, other thoughts to?
Well, off subject a little bit, Rick. I would like it if you could define for our audience some of the differences between the contractual agreements in Europe. Over here, it's obviously considerably different, but for instance, the difference between a Fest contract and a house contract.
Well, Fest contracts and house contracts is essentially the same thing. There are two general categories of contracts: guest and Fest. The guest contract, I'll start there because it's similar to what we have in the United States. Essentially, what it means is that you are not a regular salaried position at a opera company or at a house. You are somebody that they say, we're doing this production, we're going to hire them to come in, do the role, and then leave. And yes, you may get some benefits, potentially, some kind of health benefits for coverage during your time there, but you might not. uh, and then when you go away, your affiliation stops essentially. And that's what a guest contract here is as well. There are different forms of guest contracts, but that's a general category. And then a fest contract is something where it's almost like being um, in the administration. It's like it's saying that, oh, this person works for this opera company. Oh, are they a director? Do they work in human resources? Are they in the finance department? It's essentially the same thing. It's just that that person's job happens to be singing tenor, and it's usually a specific type of tenor or soprano or mezzo or whatever it may be. And those are the two types of contracts almost exclusively that you'll run into in Germany and most of Europe.
Thanks, Rick.
Sure.
Rick,
Yeah.
could you share some of the roles and that you have sung since you have left Cincinnati, and perhaps share some stories about working in Europe, and last of all, what you enjoy about singing Wagner's work?
Sure. Okay. Some roles that I've sung. I'm within the Heldentenor Fach. I'm what they call a Junglichen Heldentenor. I sing the more lyric or lighter side of Wagner's work. I don't. I have sung some Tristan, but it's not something that I sing regularly. It's not something I have in my rep. I don't really sing Siegfried, although again, I have sung some. Tannhäuser, I haven't sung that. So the heaviest things in Wagner, I tend to steer clear of. My voice isn't quite as loud, as big as that, in my opinion. At any rate, I'd like to avoid it just for vocal health reasons. For now, in a few years, we'll see. So I tend to prefer things like Siegmund and Lohengrin and Parsifal and Voltaire, when it comes to Wagner, that is. So what I have, with those roles in mind, outside of Wagner, I've also really enjoyed Fidelio, as I mentioned. Anything Strauss. I love Strauss. It is so much fun to sing. In my opinion, he is probably the most fun singer or fun composer to sing. He's not the easiest. He's not the most comfortable. He is famously tricky and difficult. But I find it to be almost a game or a puzzle. If you sing it right, you can just keep going and you can do these amazing things. And I have so much fun finding those puzzle pieces and putting them together and making it work. I love singing Bacchus. I love singing Apollo in Daphne, which some people say is the toughest Heldentenor role. Maybe I would believe it. I love singing these types of roles. I think because I am comfortable high, singing the top notes. Outside of specifically the more Heldentenor rep, I like to try to get some more lyric rep in, and I have found great enjoyment and fun in the Czech rep. Actually, I've been singing the Prince in Rusalka, Boris in Katya Kabanova. Yenufa has two good tenor roles. I try to sing one lyric role at least every year, one that's more lyric, I should say. If you spend your whole time singing really big, loud, full voice things, you can get a little stuck and it can start being difficult on your voice. So I have found, for me personally, I work best if I make sure I keep some lyric rep in there as well. When it comes to Italian, I enjoy Italian. I try to sing, I don't want to say as much as I can, but I try to look for that as well. I put that in the category of the lyric. And it may be something like a Tosca. I think I put away Rodolfo for now in La Boheme, but I enjoy singing Cavaradossi and Tosca, Don Alvaro and Forza del Destino. Incidentally, when I mentioned that Apollo and Daphne is supposed to be the hardest role to sing, I have to say, for me, Alvaro in La Forza del Destino is the hardest role I've ever sung. That is a really tough role. Maybe it's just strengths and weaknesses, but that one was tough for me. Oh, and one role I could probably, I don't want to say never get enough of, but I love singing Polione and Norma. That's a beautiful role. It's bel canto. It's the earliest thing outside of Fidelio that I sing, but it's a delight. It is so much fun. Also not easy.
You've mentioned some of the other challenges expected in this kind of repertoire in terms of like vocal health and stamina. With that in mind, to jump into a discussion of how those things work and how one can develop them, if it's okay, I'd like to share a recording of actually a time when we all worked together on a production that displays really some superhuman stamina in terms of singing. So let me cue this up. So this is Queen City Opera in 2014, our first foray into Wagner. One of the first Wagner performances in a while in Cincinnati. And this might be a world record for one of the longest notes held. So let's check this out. Absolutely incredible.
That's great.
How do you do that? Like, I know it's a combination of like, there's an intellectual challenge of just learning the amount of information in Wagner, because it's just dense and it's long. And then there's the stamina challenge of having your voice do this thing for that long. How do you stay in shape for that and prepare for it mentally and physically?
I've always found that staying in shape for it physically is more the challenge than mentally. Mentally, I have the discipline, and I think this is one thing that doesn't pertain just to Wagner. I think it pertains to singing any opera and probably just about any art form at all. There needs to be a discipline of thought, a discipline of practice, a discipline in how you prepare yourself. And it really comes down to training your brain how to think, when to think it. That way you can be ready physically. So as long as you put in the time and the effort and done your work, your homework, then I find that mentally that hasn't been my challenge. That's not to say that there aren't moments when you forget what you're doing, or you're on stage doing a role for the 20, 40, 50, whatever at the time, and you're up there singing and doing these things, and you're thinking, did I pick that up today? Do I need to go to the store tomorrow before I head home? And then pretty soon you're in trouble. You know, I'd love to say that never happened to me, and luckily, I've never really had a problem with it, but it's staying focused and staying strong mentally, I think, is something that I've been lucky enough that I haven't had to work hard on. Any singer that says that they never have a problem staying in shape physically is either trying to sell themselves or deluding themselves. That is a big part of our job, is staying in a position of being able to sing healthfully. being able to sing a role when you're feeling physically 100% is good. It's required. You need to be able to do that, or you'd have no reason to sing that. But what about when you're a little bit tired? So maybe you're feeling 90%. Can you sing it then? What about when you're kind of coming down with something and you're feeling about 75? Okay, what about when you actually are sick and you're feeling about 40? At what point do you have to cancel? Now, if you have to cancel because you're singing, because you're feeling 85%, well, then either you need to start working on your technique or your physical strength or your something. If you can sing all the way down into those lower numbers, then that's where you start running into these people that say, even when I'm sick, I can still sing. And you do run into those. I've not been the luckiest in that there is a certain level of sick that I can get to that I just can't. I just cannot. But it's rare that you actually get to sing when you're feeling 100%. Maybe one performance a year if you're lucky.
Wow.
I'm happy to sing at 90%. I'm still going to have fun. Did that answer your question?
Oh, very much so. Very, very much so.
Yeah.
I had some other questions about how that relates to training and how the voice kind of ages, but I wanted to see if Jim or Deb had anything else to ask before I launch into that.
I have one question, and this is from a moment of togetherness that was quite unique. When Rick, when you sang out in Seattle as part of the Ring Cycle, Deb was there, I was there, and we had a wonderful time all being together and watching you work. What did that experience in Seattle bring to you, career-wise and in terms of your confidence?
That was one of the definitive moments of my career. I don't know that I shouldn't say of my career. I should say of my life, because I'm not sure that, yes, it was a good thing for my career, but more happened within me and within my perception of how I fit into this business during that experience than perhaps just about any other. It was amazing to be around so many world-class Wagnerians, to watch the process. It was as you may recall, it was a 2.5-month process where they put together the whole ring. So it was 2.5 months. Every day I went to every rehearsal I could. If I wasn't in rehearsal, I was at somebody else's rehearsal. I just wanted to see everything, hear everyone, watch, absorb, take it all in. And I was amazed to find that I felt comfortable and felt like I fit in and felt like I was at home with these people and with this environment and with this music. And that's when I really, and to this day, I still feel more at home with Wagner than with any other composer. But when I start singing Wagner again, I feel like, oh, I can breathe, I can relax, I can just be. And I have Seattle to thank for so very many things. Spate Jenkins specifically, but Seattle Opera, certainly I have a lot to thank them for. And that Ring Cycle is definitely one of them. And then before then, I sang Fidelio with them, and singing chorus on for them is essentially what launched my my A-level career, my A-house career. So a lot to be thankful for, and from Seattle. And you were there for that ring, and got to see me at something of the birth of my Helden career.
It was a great honor. Remember the apartment that you had that was down by the bay, and everyone that stayed in that apartment wrote something on the wall. Remember?
Yeah, I do. It was this lovely apartment, bright and sunny, owned by a German couple. Heidi and Hans. Oh, I can't quite come up with it. But they said, please come in, make yourself at home. But most importantly, here are the markers, write something on this wall. And there's one wall where you could just look and see all the people who had stayed there before you. And it was pretty cool.
That's a great story.
Yeah. a great time.
Yeah.
Isaac, it strikes me that there was a part of your question that I didn't quite answer.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
and that was in training for a long note like those Welsas, or for any moment in opera that is particularly demanding. I think, as I mentioned, getting the mental preparation and defining those mental pathways, and then turning those into physical pathways is certainly important. But also, it's the practice and the repetition at home and on your own, and experimenting. Uh, I play around with all the roles that I do. I do them sometimes fast, I do them slow, I do them laying down, I do them hunched over a chair, I do them, while I'm vacuuming, I'll do them just in all kinds of scenarios, because one, you never know what the director's going to ask you to do.
Hmm.
And two, if it's really in your bones, then things can happen and it doesn't throw you off. And I listen to those Velazes now from that recording, and I think, oh my gosh, it's almost embarrassing how long those are. I've never found an opportunity where I would sing them like that again. But in the moment, as I was up there and we were making this music and we'd created this drama and we were at that point in the arc, between you and me and what I could feel from the audience and the orchestra, that's just what felt right. I don't know why I did it. I've never done it that long since. I don't know if I'll ever do it that long again, but in the moment, that's what felt right.
It's the magic of performance.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's also to keep in mind we were only doing one act, so I'm sure if there had been two more acts to follow,
Yeah.
everyone would appreciate just a little bit more pacing. But also thinking about pacing, I think historically, Jim, you were talking about some of the singers who created some of these Wagnerian roles. Historically, singers kind of hit their prime younger. Like Luigi Bassi, who premiered Don Giovanni, was 21 when Mozart created the role. Niemann, who Wagner had in mind for the role of Siegfried, although he didn't actually end up singing it, when Wagner was conceiving of it in the late 50s, he was in his late 20s as well. Whereas now most singers kind of hit their stride in their late 30s or 40s and continue singing much later. So looking at that timeline, especially in how it relates to conservatory training, I don't want to get too political, but I know that in terms of conservatory politics, I know that many large voice singers sometimes feel like they slip through the cracks in conservatory. That Wagner and other really heavy repertoire is usually considered off limits in a conservatory setting. But do you think there's a place for introducing it in small doses in a safe setting? Or thinking back to your experience, would you have benefited from just dipping your toes in it while you were in conservatory to have had that opportunity to try it out? I know there's a lot there, but please dig in.
Well, age is a topic for me, so I'll try not to get too intense or judgy here.
Go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
People, it is a very common question here in Germany and in much of Europe, and it's not too uncommon in the US, that when you meet somebody and you start talking to them, you say, "Oh, how old are you?" There is one reason and one reason only that somebody needs to know your name, or to know your age, and that is to judge you. It's like, okay, how old are you? Oh, I thought you'd be further by now. Oh, you're awfully young to have accomplished this. Oh, you are. And the only reason is to judge you. Why not trust your ears, trust what you know, and say, is this right? That leads me to the conservatory question. I do not, and also the origins of the Wagner roles and many roles, opera in general. I do not believe that there is a need to wait to sing any role at all, other than maybe dramatic reasons or maturity reasons. If somebody isn't ready to sing a role, well, that's different. But that's not an age, that's a timing. Somebody can be 65 years old and not ready to take it on, and that's totally legit. Somebody else can be 28 years old and asked to take on Tristan, and they may say, yeah, okay, Tristan, the character of Tristan, that's a realistic age for him. So, okay, why not? That being said, I do think it's the conservatory's job to protect the voices. When I was in conservatory, and I'm sure that I know for a fact I was not alone, but I'm sure it's this way for most of the people who are in conservatory now listening to this, I was indestructible. I could do anything. I could sing anything. I could do it the next day. I had no fear, absolutely fearless. And that's a very good way to approach your music learning. As singers, it's our job to push, and really try to develop ourselves and to go outside the realms of safety and into the realms of creativity. And it's our teacher's job, it's our coach's job to say, I see what you're doing. Yes, but here's how we need to make it safe. And I think there is a tendency for teachers just to go, no Wagner until you're 40, until you are whatever, or you will never sing Wagner. That may be true for that individual, that they're going to be 40 before they're ready, but it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with the way that their body, their voice matures, and just what their voice is. I got to Wagner young enough that I had people tell me regularly, "Oh, I think you're too young for that." I was in my early 30s when I started singing Wagner, and people thought, "Oh, that's 5-10 years too soon." I don't know. That's when I found it. That's when it worked, and I'm still singing today, and I feel like my voice is better, stronger, and healthier than ever. Could I have done what I'm doing now, or what I was doing even in my early 30s when I was in my early 20s? No, I wasn't ready. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was 21 instead of 31 or 41. It had everything to do with the fact that I just wasn't ready. My voice wasn't there yet. So there's a long and perhaps judgmental answer to your
Oh, I like this.
I have something to add, and it speaks right to what Rick just addressed. Inside the mission statements of both the Queen City Opera and the Wagner Society of Cincinnati is a goal to provide opportunity for emerging artists to, as Isaac says, dabble, put a little bit in repertoire that perhaps in the past they haven't done. In the case of the Wagner Society, we would have showcases where the students from the conservatory would just sing a couple of pieces. And there was this constant repertoire between ourselves and the voice teachers as to what was acceptable and what was not. I know, Isaac, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it was often a very often heated discussion about, well, they're not ready or this. And so we would search for lighter things that they could do. In the case of Flying Dutchman, there was always that aria by Eric, that was acceptable because of its lyric quality to the teachers. And so it was like our escape route for certain tenors that just weren't quite feeling comfortable. So but to at least provide this opportunity. And I know in where Isaac is actually staging a one act, or in some cases a complete opera, it provides this opportunity for young artists to be able to have this experience early on.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. I didn't know that I was going to be singing this rep until I tried it. And so I think this provides people a chance to look at it and say, either no, that's not for me, or maybe, but not yet. Or maybe they say, wow, maybe this is where I need to be. And I think it provides a rare opportunity for younger singers to, as you say, dip their toes in and decide if it's going to work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I might be somewhat of an outlier in this, in that I think that there's some Wagner that pretty much any voice could at least benefit from learning. there's the Waldvogel for like a lighter soprano, and there's some repertoire that everybody would benefit just as an artist from going through once with piano, if not with full orchestra, just to like get a flavor for that style of music. Who's one of the most influential composers in history, so I think there's a benefit to it. But there's one other question, and something I never quite understood. I've studied voice, but I'm by no means a singer, and I'd like to know how, when you talk about developing, not ready, how do you feel that your singing and your voice have changed in the last 10 years? Do you feel like actual physiological differences in the way that your voice functions, or is it just getting to know your body at a different way with your technique? How has that development worked as you exited conservatory and developed as a professional artist?
I think it's both. I think it's both the way that I think there is actually a physiological difference. In fact, of that, I am 100% confident in that answer. And then also familiarity that I have achieved with my body. It's kind of cool when you can be a little bit sick or under the weather or whatever the case may be. You may be tired, maybe you don't have any shows coming up, and so you've probably been drinking too much or whatever the case may be, and you find yourself the next morning practicing, and you say, okay, well, in order to sing this note, I have to do this and this and this, and you do it and it works, and you go, look at that. How cool is that? That you have a formula that is going to work even when you're not feeling good, even when you don't feel strong enough to do it. So I think it does. I think both those answers are applicable. I was just saying to my wife just 3 hours ago, maybe, that I feel like I may be starting to see signs of ossification of my voice, which is something that happens in singers at a certain point. So to back it up, to make it a little clearer for those who aren't singers who may not have this part, the male voice and the female voice mature at different rates and at different times. Female voices usually finish maturing sometime around 35. Male voices finish maturing sometime around 40. And then ossification usually starts sometime not too long after that. For some, it's a year or two. For some, it's 5-6 years. Just recently, during the pandemic specifically, I've started feeling like there is a richness, a depth to my voice that is creeping in, that it may be ossification. I can't say for certain. I feel like I would have guessed my voice would start hitting that point later, because I'm not as old as
ossification. For those who might not know, like what, it sounds like it has something to do with like bone. It's like, what is physiologically, what is ossification for a voice?
It's the same word as you would expect for the bones. Essentially what it is that the muscles become, the muscles in the neck become less flexible but stronger. They start being able to withstand more abuse, let's say, but they're not able to do some of the things they may have done when they were younger. You may not be able to do those quick runs the way you could when you were young, which is incidentally why you'll see a lot of people who sing Wagner and the like are older, generally speaking, than the people who are singing Rossini. People who are successful Rossini tenors often get there and can do it starting at a pretty young age. Wagnerians, it's hit and miss. Some can, some can't. But the average age tends to be older for Wagner. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It means that in my days of, I hope it doesn't mean bad things for Polioni, but we'll wait until my next Polioni to find out, I guess. But generally, I'm excited to be getting to this ossification, because it's something of the culmination. It's what, we aren't shooting for that point as singers, but we have this awareness that when we get to that point and it finishes ossifying and we get comfortable with that, essentially that's as good as our voice is going to get. So it's exciting. It's also a bit terrifying.
Cool. What a time to be experiencing that, you know, and to be trying that out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I'm great. No one's grateful for this pandemic, but I've found some silver linings, and one of them is I've had plenty of time to practice with no performances pushing on me. I shouldn't say none. I've had a few things here and there, but I've had a lot of free time where I can just experiment and play, and I feel like it has been good for my voice. It's been good for my technique. So maybe it's not ossification. Maybe it's just me getting more comfortable in my technique or finding new things. But one way or the other, I'm excited. I'm excited for this pandemic to get over so I can get out there and sing.
Totally. I think we're all looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you have lined up right after this? Assuming there's a miracle vaccine available for everyone tomorrow, what are you likely going to be singing?
Well, currently there are 3 contracts which I am not doing. One is Katja Kabanova in Innsbruck. One is Lohengrin in Lübeck, and the other one is Hoffmann at Komische Oper, Berlin.
Wow.
And those would be what I would be doing at the moment in theater. But of course, at this point, those 3 aren't going to happen. They all 3 of them have said that they're going to reschedule, and in fact, the Komische Oper has rescheduled. So I have that already in place, assuming that we get to that point of doing it and we don't cancel it again. Then after this, I have a set of Schumann ballads that are being staged, and that's in Paris, and that will be in April and May. Again, we'll see if that happens. After that is the Bayreuth Festival.
Ooh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Which, of course, I'm excited. I was supposed to be doing it this past summer, but
Oh,
yeah. So
wow.
we'll give it another try this summer, and then after that maybe the return of the Hoffmann at Komische, but we'll wait and see. And then there are a number of inquiries and offers, so to speak, that are within that time frame and shortly to follow that. They just haven't actually given contracts. I have found that I've had a lot of inquiries and a lot of requests to do things without contract, and then they're going to wait and see, and that way when they can't do it, they don't have to cancel the contract and risk any kind of penalties or anything like that. I can understand it, but it means that I'm doing a lot of waiting.
Rick,
Yeah.
will you keep your schedule posted on a personal website for those of us who might be traveling to
Yeah.
Europe? Good.
Yeah. RicFurman.com, just my name.com. I keep everything pretty up to date. I do it myself, so it does lag behind from time to time. So if that's the case and you see something that's out of date information, feel free to shoot me a message and say, is this current? No, sorry. Okay, I'll get on it. I'll be maybe sitting in a hotel someplace updating it, but I will get.
Very cool. Jim or Deb, any other final thoughts to add? I mean, that's all I had. I think this has been a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, I want to say that on behalf of the Wagner Society of Cincinnati, and I'm sure equally the Queen City Opera, we are very proud of you. We are very proud of your career, to have been a part of the trajectory of your career, and we enjoy living vicariously through following your career. So good luck on the future. Keep us in the loop, and it's been a great honor to work with you all these years.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support that you've given me for so long now. There is a great deal of luck involved in succeeding in a career, and part of that luck is finding the people that believe in you and support you, and that can be there for you from time to time as you need it. And everyone on this call has known me for, let's see, I think the least would be 6 years, I
Yeah.
believe.
At least, yeah.
Oh, yeah, or no, 6 years, I think, maybe 7. So it's been, you've all been there for quite some time, and I'm grateful to the many people who have supported me and been there for me and helped create that magical luck that we talk about. So thank you. Thank you, Jim, Isaac, Deb,
You're welcome.
for having me today and also for your support over the years.